Welcome back to my channel. I'm Lee Johnson, where we talk about magic, mysticism, witchcraft, and all those very interesting things. Now, I was asked to talk about balancing the elements, and this is in regards to obviously the alchemical or occult elements. And so we're going to get into that today and have a look through it and the various ways we can do that. Okay, so first the intro video. Welcome to my channel. You are entering the world of magic and mysticism with your host, Lee W. Johnson. Keep the lights on and help improve the channel by becoming a supporter for just $2.99 per month. Hit the join button. Okay, so balancing the elements. I think what we first need to understand is the alchemical elements themselves. So in alchemy, it's believed that there are 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And these are present in all matter, which includes obviously the body. So when we're talking about balancing the elements, we're talking about balancing the elements within ourselves or within our space, within our working area, whatever that may be. So these elements represent qualities or characteristics. So fire would represent transformation and purification, earth would represent stability and grounding, air represents movement and communication, whereas water would represent emotions and intuition. Now, apart from these 4 alchemical elements, the alchemists also included 3 additional elements, being sulfur, mercury, and salt. And these are seen as being sulfur representing the soul or the spiritual essence, mercury representing the mind or the mental aspect, and salt representing the physical body, the material. When we do get into the elements, the 4 elements themselves, air, fire, water, and earth, we bring them into the body, which I'll get to just now. But in that respect, we can consider the air element to be, because it's connected with communication, we can consider it to be the mental aspect. Fire is connected with passion, and therefore we can connect it with the spiritual aspect. Water is very emotional. It's the flow of emotions and things like that, so that would be the emotional body. And then earth is earth. It's physical, it's grounding, it's material, it's the actual physical body of our entire makeup of our energy bodies. So one thing to understand about these elements is that they're not necessarily talking about the actual minerals and nutrients within the body. We're talking about an occult or a spiritual aspect of these elements. So you just have to bear that in mind. But a balance of the elements themselves can bring about good health, can bring about good health mentally, emotionally, and physically, and spiritually. So it is important, especially, well, for everybody really, even those people who don't work magic. But because we are people who do work magic, we are aware of these things, whereas somebody who does not is usually not aware of them. So they may turn to medication and such things in order to try and bring a balance back. Now, I'm not saying don't take your medicine. That would be a very bad thing. You need to take the medicine that your GP gave you. But at the same time, because we are magic users and we understand the principles of magic and the balancing of the elements which needs to take place, then we can work with those elements in order to improve our health, our mental health, our emotional health, and our physical health, and our spiritual health. And you'll find that the elements just go out of balance all the time. You know, depending on the situation, depending on if you've contracted some illness or something, if you have gone through some kind of emotional upheaval, if you're going through a stressful period, all of these things on a daily basis can push our elements out of balance. So therefore we can use magic, we can use spiritual practices in order to bring the elements back into balance and bring that health back into our entire body. And you know, when I say body, I'm not just talking about the physical, obviously. Now, one way of doing this I've found to be very useful. There are a lot of ways you can bring the body back into balance. You can use exercise, you can use energy meditations, moving meditations such as Qigong and yoga. But one of them which I've found to be very useful is Ayurveda. Now, you know, when a lot of people, especially Western people, hear Ayurveda and they are somewhat familiar with it, they usually just go straight to the idea that it is about diet. And it is largely about diet. But Ayurveda is a lot more than just what you eat. It's what you eat, it's how you eat, it's when you eat. And there's a lot of other things incorporated within Ayurvedic practice, such as massage. You know, even going into things like looking good dental care. But you know, an Ayurvedic massage often incorporates sesame oil, and there are specific ways in which you actually massage your body. And you know, if you have problem falling asleep at night, what you can do is take some sesame oil, just warm it up slightly so it's sort of lukewarm, and then massage your calves and your feet, and then go to bed, and you might find that you sleep a lot better. But there's a lot of practices within Ayurveda which are balancing, because the whole principle is that each person has a unique constitution, which they call a dosha. There are 3 primary doshas, and these are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And these relate to the elements of air, fire, and water, respectively. And what you'll find is when you go into studying the practice itself, these 3 doshas don't just relate to a person themselves. There are also periods of 4 hours, you know, going in a cycle throughout the day. So you have 4 hours of Vata, followed by 4 hours of Kapha, and then 4 hours of Pitta, and then that cycle, that's a 12-hour period, so then that cycle repeats over a 24-hour period. So every 12 hours you have a cycle of these 3 energies. So because each energy relates to a different element, Vata, for instance, is air, therefore it's a very mental period of the day. Pitta is related to fire, so it's a very active period, whereas Kapha, which is water, is a very kind of slow, sluggish type of period. And when you relate that to how you eat, then what we find is that particular periods of the day are better for different meals and different foods. Just as an example, if you were to eat your main meal in the evening, you're probably eating it at the time of Kapha, which is a very watery, very slow type of energy. So your digestive system actually slows down, and therefore the food isn't digested as well as it could be or should be. So with Ayurvedic practice, it's suggested that you actually eat your main meal at lunchtime, which is during a period of Pitta, when energy is moving fast. It's the fire energy. It's very active, so your digestive system is working properly in that period of time. And if you just follow the basic principles, you'll find that especially if you do have digestive problems, you suffer from acid reflux and things like that, if you just follow the basic principles, it changes everything. It makes things so much better. I suffer from a lot of digestive problems, acid reflux, dyspepsia, a whole lot of stuff. I have for many years, and I switched to just simply, not particularly following the diets, although I try to, the actual foods and the actual recipes, but just switching my main meal, which I used to have in the evening, because that's what we do. We have our main meal in the evening. It's dinner time, supper time. Just switching that to lunchtime and then having a very small meal in the evening, it's made a whole lot of difference. I haven't suffered from acid reflux or anything for a long time. And if I do feel some acid reflux starting, or I start feeling bloated or something like that, another minor thing, which we consider minor, but I found it to be huge, is simply drinking boiled water instead of water out the tap. Because water out the tap takes apparently 5 hours to digest. I did not know this before. 5 hours to digest, whereas if you boil the water and you let it cool down, it digests in 2 hours. And I found that just having a glass of water when I start feeling bloated, or I do start to feel some acid reflux, it just takes it away immediately. So all these little changes, and I bring up Ayurveda because what you're doing is you're working with the elements themselves and the actual energy cycles during the day in order to help to balance your physical body. And when you're balancing your physical body and it's in good health, then all of the other bodies follow suit. Now, there are various other ways we can do elemental balancing. So there's elemental meditations, and I'll get into meditations and visualizations a bit more just now. But with elemental meditations, you are basically just meditating or focusing and visualizing on a particular element, and you are pulling that into your body in order to create a balance. Depending on which element is out of balance, you can work with it to pull more in, or it may be you may need to release some of that element, and you can do that by either releasing it or using a counter element. But as I said, I'll get a bit more into that just now. There's also elemental rituals, and this often incorporates lighting different colored candles. When we look at the elements, especially from a Western mystery tradition perspective, we have the 4 colors of air being orange, fire being red, water being blue, and earth being green. So we can cast a circle, we can light candles, or we can use the physical objects in the 4 directions. We can we can take an actual fan, one of those hand fans. We can use that to represent air, or we can use incense. The smoke rises up to the air. And then in fire, we can use a candle. In water, we can use a glass or a chalice or a bowl filled with water. And then in earth, we can use a rock or a plant or something like that. So you can actually represent the 4 elements in the 4 directions by using the actual elements themselves. And there's various ways we can actually work with this. We can sit in the center, face a particular direction, and pull that energy, the elemental energy, into us. We can also cast a circle, which is elementally balanced. So we're pulling in the 4 elements within the 4 directions into the space that we're sitting in. And because that space becomes balanced, we can then let that imbue ourselves, and the energy then starts to balance out, because what is outside becomes inside, and what is inside becomes outside. So everything starts to pull in, starts to recognize the other thing, and therefore it starts to balance. Everything within that space starts to balance, which includes you. We can also do elemental yoga. So there are particular poses within yoga which focus on the elements themselves. Tadasana, or the mountain pose, would be one that you can work with to balance earth energy. So there's a lot of different things, poses we can, or asanas we can use from yoga in order to balance the elements themselves. So now, in regards to meditation and ritual aspect, the visualization, we can have a look at S. Connolly. I'm not sure how many books she's actually mentioned this in. I know it's in, sorry, let me just check the title, Demonologist's Guide to Demonic Magic. Can't reach it, so I can't show you. But in that book, it discusses the elements and elemental magic, and it has a particular meditation of visualization that you can use to balance the elements. And it's a very simple meditation, and she suggests casting a circle first, and it's a good idea, because then, when you are casting a circle from S. Connolly's works, you're working with the 5 elemental kings, and therefore you are creating a space that you're working in which is elementally balanced to begin with. So that aids in the process. Then the visualization itself, I would suggest getting the book, or it might be online actually, just the elemental balancing exercise. So go and have a look for it, so you've got all of the steps properly. I'm just outlining it here. So what you would do is you visualize a box, and in this box you put all of the elements one by one from yourself. So you bring them out of yourself and you put them in the box, and each element can be represented by different things. And you do this because, over time the elements within ourselves become exhausted. They may become diseased from negative energies. So we need to, every now and again, just refresh. This is very much a cleansing exercise. So where you might take cleansing baths or spiritual baths, where you might do meditations which cleanse the energy off you, the negative energies, this is one way of doing that as well. So you're getting rid of all those icky, exhausted energies of the elements themselves. So each element would represent, or was represented by something. So when you take the earth element out of yourself, it may be dirt, or it may be leaves, or something like that. When you are taking the fire element out of you, it could just be purely a ball of fire, etc., etc. And then you put these into the box. And you may need to do this more than once, but put each element into the box one by one, and just continue until you feel you've gotten rid of all of those energies, the elements themselves. Then you shut the box, you throw it away. Okay, then you have a new box, and inside the new box are the 4 elements, which are all sparkly clean. And you take those, you open the box and you take those into yourself one by one. So that's one way of doing it. As I said, a very cleansing technique. But another way, which is more aligned to what I've kind of come to practice over the years, is using breath work. So you use visualization as well, but it largely relies on breath work, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be pulling the element into your body, and you use breath work in order to do that. Now, what this incorporates is visualizing yourself surrounded by the elements. So if it's fire, you're surrounded by fire. If it's water, you are sitting in a large body of water. If it's air, you can imagine clouds, billowing clouds around you. If it's earth, you can imagine yourself sitting on a rock or in a forest or something like that. And then what you do is through breath work, you actually pour breathe the energy into your body, and you then balance out the elements this way. Now, this is what I was taught in Practical Kabbalah, and in that system itself, what I was taught at the time was that we have the 4 elements in different areas of our body. So areas in the head and coming down to the throat where we speak. Fire is in the upper torso, chest, going down to around about the solar plexus. And then water is in the lower torso, so it's the belly, and earth is the groin and the legs and the feet. Some systems do swap fire and water. I think they mostly do this because water is connected with emotions and the heart is in the chest, and fire is very largely connected with the digestive system, and we often consider the digestive system to be in our bellies. I prefer to work with fire in the chest and water in the belly. Water in the belly because this is where all of our soft organs are, our bladder is, and our watery system. So it's our bladder, intestines and things like that. So that's in our belly, it's a soft area. Whereas fire is connected with passion, which is connected with the heart. And it's also, when we think of our digestive system, we often think of it in our belly area, our lower torso. But when you have acid reflux, when you have an intense fire in your digestive system, it's always in the upper torso where your stomach is. So this is where we find the bile and things like that. So this is main reason why I keep fire in the chest and water in the belly. But if you go into Chinese systems, they also talk about the fire being in the middle dantian and water being in the lower dantian. So there's a lot of connection between systems regarding fire being in the chest and water being in the belly. So that's why I prefer to keep them there. Now, when we talk about this, we don't mean that it's just, fire in the chest. You've got all of the elements in your entire body and working throughout and moving around. But what you'll find is that this is just a focus of energy. So as I said, when you do have acid reflux or heartburn, it's usually because there's too much fire, and that's always in the chest. And what we can do is, if we have an overdrive of an element, we can counter that with the opposing element. So acid reflux, it's too much fire. You can then counter that with water. So what you would do is you would pour breathe water into your chest area where you're feeling the heartburn or the acid reflux, and you then balance out that fire. So you can use opposing elements to balance out other elements which are in overdrive. However, you may find that an element is lacking. Let's say, for instance, you are studying and you are finding you just can't retain the energy. Now, this may be because your mind is overactive. You're thinking about too many other things rather than focusing on what you're studying. That could be an overdrive, an overactive aspect of air itself. So you can balance that out. You can either remove air, because you can take elements in and energy in, but you can also push energy and elements out. So you could remove some of the air. Don't remove all of it, of course, otherwise you're not going to have any air left in your head. Yes, I think this is where the phrase of airhead comes from. But anyway, besides that, so if it's in overdrive, you can either remove it or you can balance it with an opposing element. In this case, I may use earth in order to bring that grounding that you need, because your mind is just in overdrive. You need to pull it back down to earth and therefore you can bring some earth in order to balance the air element. But at the same time, you may be lacking in air in your head, and you may have studied for hours and hours, and then you just draw a blank. There's just nothing there. So you then need to bring air in, so you can actually pull the air element into your head. So there's all ways to look at this, and it's not just physical. You're not just looking at your physical body, you're looking at your mental body, your emotional body, your spiritual body. In all areas, you are going to have imbalances now and again. And, you know, as I said, you've always got imbalances, but sometimes they become so severe that you feel them. They are noticeable, and then you need to do some work in order to bring balance back again. So this is really what elemental balancing is. And, you know, if you do go into the elements, and it's, I mean, the occult elements, the alchemical elements are kind of a cornerstone of a lot of practices within magic, especially Western mystery tradition, and everything that encompasses. So it's one of those things which you kind of need to learn quite extensively. So the obvious thing is learn what the elements are, learn how they affect things, and then figure out which element is in overdrive or in lack, and then figure out how to actually counter that or increase it. And there's a variety of methods you can do this. I've only just mentioned two. And the one is very general. Esconolese is very general. You're getting rid of all the elements and you're pulling in fresh elements. The other one is more specific to balancing particular elements. You know, instead of working with them all at once, you are identifying what actually needs to be pulled into balance. So understanding the elements is definitely something you have to do, you need to do if you're going to practice magic, and then just go from there, work from there. And when you start to understand the elements, then you start to understand how they affect different parts of us. You know, it could be, as I said, we've got the different energy bodies, and the physical body is an energy body. It's the physical body is made up of atoms. Atoms vibrate, which is energy. So the physical body itself is an energy body. Then we have the emotional body and the mental body and the astral or spiritual body. We have the ethereal body, and the ethereal body is kind of like a skin almost, which goes over the physical body, and it acts kind of like a blueprint. So if something goes wrong in the ethereal body, then not long after, not long after being, let's say, 2 weeks, it's going to then start to manifest into the physical body. So we can usually see disease and things like that before they actually get into the physical body by viewing the aura. And by viewing the aura, you're viewing the etheric body. So if you were to notice an imbalance within the elements, you'll probably notice it in the etheric body first, and then you can actually bring balance into the etheric body, which then keeps the physical body healthy. So yeah, but then, as I said, you need to identify where things are being affected, whether it is the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, and identify the element which is in overdrive or in lack, and then figure out how to actually solve that problem and work with the specific elements themselves. Alright, so I think that's enough about elemental balancing, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Well, I'll see you on Wednesday, obviously. Have a good one till then. Cheers for now. Bye bye.